Well, if you're looking for a more explosive New Orleans Saints offense in 2023, things are off to a really, really good start. We got all of that and a little bit of lanyard for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into another episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much, as always, for making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget, you can subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss a daily episode. And if you ever want to continue the conversation one-on-one with me, you can head over to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSaints. As always, I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media, senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network, Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation site covering the New Orleans Saints. You can find me every Tuesday on the Locked On NFL podcast and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. On today's episode, we're going to be joined by Doug Mouton of WWL to help us break down everything going on with the New Orleans Saints in their second day of minicamp. He's a sports director there at WWL. You can follow him on Twitter at DMouton, MOUTON WWL. But what exactly are we going to be discussing? Well, we're going to get to Alvin Kamara and sort of how he's been looking, because he has been looking outstanding since showing up for minicamp, and the way that he's been working with Derek Carr seems like things going very well there. Chris Olave seems to be lining himself up for a huge year too, but it all starts and ends at the quarterback, and that's where we're going to start off. I asked Doug to kick everything off. How comfortable has Derek Carr looked in getting used to this New Orleans Saints offense, and what has he brought to the New Orleans Saints that's been observable during these minicamp and OTA practices? Let's kick it off there with Doug Mouton, sports anchor and sports director over at WWL.
Yeah, look, I mean, the one thing that stands out for him, and it's when you watch tape, it's the same thing. He throws a beautiful deep ball. And the play of the first 2 days was him going deep to Chris Olave. It was a thing of beauty. And it worked wonderfully. And it's one of the things you hope he can do. And he did it in a big way. Yeah, he's been crisp. You just love his energy, his enthusiasm. After Olave caught it, he ran down the field with the one finger up. You know, you've seen him sort of do that move with the Raiders, and it was fun to see. And he's done everything right. I mean, look, he's not facing a real pass rush. He's not facing, a real coverage with a pass rush. So we're not seeing him in positions where he has at times had struggles in his career. We're seeing him, in the best possible light, and he's delivering so far. And look, the other thing about him, you get a real sense of what a team guy he is, how conscious he is of his teammates. He's conscious of saying the right thing and perpetually doing the right thing. He's working with Mike Thomas on the side. He talked about this, which is just an interesting sort of window into into how he thinks. He's working with Mike Thomas. Then he thought, am I working with Mike Thomas too much? Then he said, whoa, I'm getting tired. I'm 32. Let's break this off. He sort of made an excuse to get off the field. He didn't want to say something to Mike Thomas, but he thought maybe I shouldn't be working. Anyway, he overanalyzes to the point that you can see him sort of wrapping people in. It's kind of how you want your leader to be. And I like everything I've seen about him today. And again, we haven't seen him in any of the situations where he has at times struggled. And I think that is important to mention. But everything he has done so far has been terrific and on point.
Yeah, and the good news is that he's showing up and he's performing well in a scenario and in an environment that he should be performing well without that coverage, without that pass rush.
That's exactly it, yes.
Yeah, be almost more concerned if he wasn't there.
2 minutes to say what you just said in 8 seconds. And isn't that you're so much better lit than me? I'm the guy who's on TV for this soft, terrible lighting. And you look good and I look terrible. But yeah, Derek Carr did everything you hoped he would at this point. And then a lot of adversity yet, but that's okay. He's been terrific.
Absolutely. And so when you look at Derek Carr, you look at this New Orleans Saints offense, clearly he looks like he's fitting in. Things are kind of going well there, but it's not just about sort of the connection between him and these receivers. He's got a familiar face in Foster Moreau with these tight ends. He's got a lot of weapons, and it feels like Dennis Allen really went out of his way to kind of reframe that offense and build those skill position players around the quarterback. How big do you think that is in Derek Carr's eyes?
Yeah, look, and that's a good question. It's a little bit loaded. I'll say this too. Foster Moreau has looked really good. He looks shockingly athletic for a guy coming off the treatments he's had and all. Foster Moreau looked like made several catches yesterday and today. That Foster Moreau has been unbelievably impressive. If you know what the last few months have looked like for him, I will say this. Look, I love the 1-2-3 receiver core, and I talked to Pete Carmichael about it today. Look, I love Olave and Rashid, Shaheed, and Mike Thomas. The three of them, how they can fit together. Shaheed and Olave can both get up the field. Derek Carr throws a deep ball better than any Saints quarterback we've seen in a long time, and it'll be really interesting to see how he can hook up with them. But, and I think this is the potential. And look, I think Taysom Hill's going to play a bigger role. I think the tight end position has gone from a liability to a strength. I love Juwan Johnson. I love the running back spot. But Rashid Shaheed is dealing with a little bit of a groin injury, and as fast as he is, there could be things like that. Mike Thomas is still not on the field. So, yes, Chris Olave did a lot of good things, but we're seeing a lot of Keith Kirkwood so far. We're seeing a lot of Traquan Smith. We're seeing a lot of a group that when those big three are on the field, I think it's a solid group. Counting on Rashid Shaheed to play what might be 4 or 5 times the number of snaps this year is a little bit of a gamble. And counting on a healthy Mike Thomas is a little bit of a gamble, maybe a lot of a gamble even. And what's after them is clearly not just one step down on the ladder. You're going multiple steps down on the ladder. And if your wide receiver threesome is Chris Olave, Keith Kirkwood, and Traquan Smith, if you rank the 32 NFL teams, that's going to be 28th best at best. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
I love the front line. Look, and they've got depth at running back.
Mm-hmm.
And I like Lucas Kroll. I think they have depth at tight end, but at wide receiver, the depth it's extremely thin. And the top three look good, but I do think that is one of the potential Achilles heels of this team. And we're seeing it in minicamp, where Shaheed's not on the field and Mike Thomas isn't on the field. And without those two, it's not a great group.
How do you feel that two of the other new addition veteran wide receivers have looked so far, Bryan Edwards as well as James Washington? Have either of them stood out to a point to where you think, okay, maybe one of them can be that kind of extra depth piece that could be helpful?
Yeah, that's a great question. Obviously, the same hope one of them can be. I will say, Bryan Edwards, just the athleticism of even a guy. Look, he's been cut by a couple of teams. Even a guy who's maybe a fourth receiver on a team. That was why it was routine pass play, and the main target was choice 1, and he was maybe choice 3 or 4. And what they'll do is an assistant coach will throw to all 5 of the guys in the pattern, right? So he was running a deep pattern, and Derek Carr, and I'm not even sure it was Derek Carr, it might have been James. Whatever the quarterback was in didn't throw to him. So just one of the coaches throws a bomb to him, and he goes up one-handed and snatches it out of the air. And I remember just looking at him thinking, the athleticism of even the guy, that's just not something you saw 20 years ago from anybody. And now you see it from the guy who may be the 4th guy on the team. Look, I'm hoping Bryan Edwards can be that. I haven't seen – and I watch the wide receivers a lot. I haven't seen anybody. And look, a lot of guys have done a few things here, a few things there. And we're not even to training camp yet. But nobody has grabbed me in a way that like Willie Snead did in West Virginia. It was a guy, you're looking at the roster going, who the heck is this guy? And then he turns out to be, a really good player in the NFL. Nobody's grabbed me like that. I will say this. At OTAs, Rashid Shaheed did grab me like that. Where I saw Rashid Shaheed coming out of breaks and exploding in a way that I thought, this guy really has a crazy upside. And look, anybody who doesn't know what Mike Thomas, look, you can be doubtful at this point. He's earned that. But Mike Thomas is unbelievable. I haven't seen a guy step up to be a potential number 4 yet. Traquan Smith's made a few plays. He's also dropped a bunch of balls. So I don't know at this point. I will say, if there's somebody out there that they can go out and get a guy who can be a 4 and maybe be a reliable fill-in piece, I think there's definitely the window is open for a guy to step in and do something right.
All right, family, coming up next, Doug is sticking around with us, and we're taking a look at Chris Olave. He says he wants to be the best. How close is he to getting there in just his second year? We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Maybe it's time to start looking at a guy like Derek Carr and what his odds are. He has an over-under set at the moment over at FanDuel for his passing yards, 4,500 yards. If you think that Derek Carr can throw for more than 4,001 yards or more than 4,000 yards in 2023, you might be able to win yourself some quick cash over at FanDuel today. And best of all, if you're a first-time user of FanDuel, you're going to be able to get a no-sweat first bet up to $2,500. That's bonus bets that come back if your first bet doesn't win. You want to get a hold of that. You want to get on some early week 1 odds. The Saints favorite at home against the Tennessee Titans, favorite in the NFC South. You want to get into some of those Derek Carr odds, maybe even some MVP end-of-year season awards for around the NFL. You can find all of it at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Use that URL so you get that no-sweat first bet of up to $2,500 in bonus bets. Once again, that is FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Appreciate all the everydayers out there making us your first listen of the day every day. Doug Mouton still with us. We were discussing Derek Carr, but also the weapons that he has around him. And Chris Olave, of course, a big-time standout so far throughout the offseason. What exactly, though, has stood out about him, and how close is he to being great? Here's what Doug and I discussed when it comes to Chris Olave.
Yeah, look, he's just so smooth. He does everything so well. He says he's a little bigger, and he said his target weight was 195, and he's honestly, I can't really see it in him. He's still not the biggest receiver. He's not small, but he's not the biggest receiver. Look, he just looks terrific. He's the smooth first-round draft pick playmaker. I would certainly expect him to take a step forward in year 2. I certainly would expect Derek Carr to put him in more positions to succeed. I would certainly expect him to go deep a lot more, and we've seen a lot of that already. And you love to see them have success together, and they're getting a little taste of that early. I think Chris Olave is poised to have a huge year. I do think he needs some help. And look, if either Thomas or Shaheed's not there, you might be playing Morrow and Juwan Johnson in passing situations. You might be playing Alvin Kamara and Kendre Miller. You might have to be creative in how to get 5 receivers in the pattern that only involves 2 wide receivers. You know what I mean? Like they may have to look at moving guys around, because I like where they are at every position, and I don't dislike where they are at wide receiver if they had a little bit more depth. But look, Chris Olave looks like the guy. I mean, we saw it last year. He looks like a guy ready to take another step.
Yeah, and he said, I want to be the best. That's his drive. That's not surprising, especially coming out of the program that he came from. We saw that in Michael Thomas. We've seen that in several others. But a lot of his success is kind of going to be determined upon the success of the guys that are surrounding him. So I understand why, a guy like Michael Thomas taking coverage away, taking attention away, and opening up the opportunities for Chris Olave, that's going to end up being a huge part of his game, I imagine. And so, yeah, you do want to see those other receivers around him stay healthy, right?
Yeah, no question. And yeah, any NFL wide receiver that gets double coverage, he's gonna get the best cornerback on every team. They roll more than that in your way. Look, everybody in the NFL is good, and the more they roll your way, the harder it's going to be. He needs Rashid Shaheed. He needs another home run hitter. If the 3 of them can get on the field together, in theory, your 5 people in a passing situation are those 3 with Juwan Johnson and Alvin Kamara. That is a fairly lethal set of 5 guys. Because if Juwan Johnson did a ton of damage last year, and he's your 5th guy of those 5, right? You got to play Shaheed, can go deep. Chris Olave is legit. Thomas and Kamara. Like, that is a good set. We just need to see that set on the field.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier that Derek Carr delivers a really good deep ball. I think that's maybe a part of his game that a lot of folks don't really highlight very often. They tend to focus on what he does kind of in the more, I'll call it death by paper cuts type of role, like what we used to see with Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints. But how does a guy like Chris Olave help to accentuate a bit of what Derek Carr can do down the field? And how much of that did you get to see in that second mini camp day?
Yeah, well, we saw a little bit of it. Look, we saw it as soon as they went to the 2-minute offense. They immediately go deep to Olave and they hit it. And it was a thing of beauty. It was a touchdown right off the bat. I actually talked to Pete Carmichael about that, about how much do you, and actually my question for him is, look, and I know Pete is a creative, inventive offensive coordinator. How much fun is this to take what you do, add Derek, and then try to incorporate what he does? And he talked about his level of fun getting to do that. And he has built an offense, or they have built a wide receiver core made for what Derek Carr does well. Olave and Shaheed, what they do singularly best is get downfield, take the top off of defenses. And what Derek Carr can, in theory, do best is take the top off of defenses and go deep. And he's got two guys in his offense that can both be elite at that role. I love how they sort of came together by luck because they had those two guys before they got but look, I think it's a threesome that can, and I asked that to Pete Carmichael, and he did talk about how much fun it is to try to incorporate that stuff and that they do complement each other really well. And then Mike Thomas, if you think of the type of piece that if you would come up with a piece to go with Olave and Shaheed, you wouldn't have Hunter Renfrow. You'd want a big body guy. Derek Carr said looks like a linebacker. You'd want Mike Thomas to run a slant and be able to occupy people short and occupy people in an end zone. You bring in Foster Moore, who I think is also a perfect complement for the two fast guys because he's huge and is terrific. In traffic, he's a terrific goal line guy. Has been for Derek Carr. I like the pieces. You brought up the weapons. I like what they've done with the weaponry, with the exception of I wish they had one more veteran, like if they added Hunter Renfrow, and maybe if they had a draft pick, in the 4th or 5th round. And I know they have A.T. Perry, and we'll see. I'm hoping somebody steps up the way Shaheed did. Haven't seen it yet. Hoping somebody does that. And I would still love them to go get one more guy who's caught a couple hundred balls in the NFL.
Yeah, it would certainly be great to have that additional experience there. I think that this wide receiver core is a far venture from the Traquan Smith, Lil Jordan Humphrey, Marquez Callaway group, but how long, when it comes to health, does that remain true?
Yeah, if they're at their best, they're infinitely better than the group you just mentioned. My question is, Shaheed's not the thickest guy, and he's already, the way he runs. The fastest guys are prone to the little muscle injuries.
And those groin injuries are pesky too.
Incredibly. And already in minicamp, we're not seeing Mike Thomas yet. And I get that. They're being slow with him. And he actually looks good working on the side. Maybe he is good enough to go if this was an actual game week. I don't know that. Like I said, I like what they've done. I need to see it on an actual football field in an actual ball game.
All right, y'all. Up next, we're taking a look, continuing along the offense, but we're going to get a little bit of defense in there too. Alvin Kamara, big play. Allante Taylor, big play. How important are they to the success of the New Orleans Saints in 2023? Got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation, and wrap it up today's episode of Locked On Saints with Doug Mouton, sports director over at WWL Channel 4 here in New Orleans. He was there for minicamp day 2, which saw a big play from Alvin Kamara, as well as a big play from Allante Taylor. So let's wrap things up discussing both and how important they are to the success of the New Orleans Saints in 2023.
Yeah, it's funny because I have a photographer with me, Mike, who's not a regular sports photographer. A regular sports photographer is now in Omaha. with LSU at the College World Series. And,
Jello shots.
And I said, all right. And I tell Mike, and I think this is the way to watch practice. I think you and I have had this discussion before too. When you're watching a Saints practice, I try not to watch for anything, but just to watch and to see what strikes me, to see what stands out, and then to take notes at guys who surprise you. Sometimes if you're looking for something, you tend to find it. Whereas if you're not looking for anything, then things find you. I don't know if that makes sense. It does to me.
Yep.
It's like Marcus May. I thought Marcus May had one of his best days today. And he's not a guy that I marked down a lot at training camp last year. But I remember I marked it down and I went, well, that's a pleasant surprise because he's a guy the Saints need in a big way. And I want to see him jump out. And I wasn't looking for him, but he did. So I find those kind of things positive. Kamara, getting back to what I was going to say, I asked Mike when he was done, and I told him, I said, just shoot the practice and see what happens. So when it was over, I said, so tell me what you got. He said, I got a lot of Alvin Kamara. And I said, really? I said, we did a story on Kamara yesterday. And he said, I know. He just kept doing stuff. So, which is one of those things. Kamara just kept catching balls. Look, Kamara looked spectacular at training camp last year. He looks great at training camp right now. I have no idea how things are going to play out. Now, I will say we saw him in the locker room today, and we asked if he would talk, and he said no. In all honesty, I think it's better for him. I think he should not talk on camera until
he will politely decline that until he doesn't have to anymore.
We have to ask, but I'm almost hoping he'll tell me no because it's not in his best interest. The trial is in 6 weeks. We'll see how that affects training camp. We'll see if there's some kind of settlement before trial. Nobody knows what the NFL is going to do. Obviously, that's why the Saints overcompensated with Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller. So I think the running back position is going to be fine. Obviously, it's going to be better if Kamara is there because he's a spectacular talent. But I think they're going to be fine at that position either way. But yeah, Alvin Kamara, from a football standpoint, don't worry about him at all. But July 31st, a worry is appropriate for that.
Yes, that is completely understanding. As we look at the rest of that running back room, I know we haven't gotten the chance to see Kendre Miller. We haven't gotten the chance to see Eno Benjamin just yet. Those seem like guys that are going to be able to contribute in the receiving role and maybe potentially help there if Alvin Kamara does miss some time. But I'll tell you, for me during OTAs, Jamal Williams stood out to me as a receiving back as he continued to work on that throughout mini camps.
Yeah, no question. Look, Jamal Williams is an interesting character. We at one point, Fletcher Mackel he works at the NBC station in New Orleans. I'm at the CBS station. We both started asking a question at the same time. So after we were done interviewing, he said, all right, I need to see you guys. You have to rock, paper, and scissors. Like, just the way he commands a room, I think he's going to be a spectacular addition. He's dancing, in the huddle or, between plays, not when he's in the game, but he's dancing on the side. Like, I think he's going to be a great unifying, you're going to play better when there's some joy to it. And I think he's going to wind up being a great addition to this team, as much for his personality as for what he can do on the field. As for what he can do on the field is terrific. Although I will say this about running backs in general. I remember Sean Payton saying this, that it was when Kyrie Robinson first exploded, the Saints did at the end of training camp, or 2 weeks into training camp, instead of a preseason game, they would actually, they called it the black and gold scrimmage. Now it became less and less of a scrimmage. But I remember at some point, I guess this was about 14 or 15, where it was a real scrimmage. And this guy, Kyrie Robinson, who was an undrafted free agent, is all of a sudden breaking tackles and running hard. And literally no one had ever heard of him. I think he was from one of those Texas schools, like I'm trying to remember which one, Texas A&M Commerce maybe. But anyway, and so he came from an unknown school. We didn't know anything about him. And I remember Sean Payton saying running back might be the single hardest position to evaluate until you get to full tackling, until you get to a preseason game. So I don't know how much evaluation we can do on Jamal Williams or any of the guys potentially lined up behind him until we get to the preseason games. But look, I love what they did with that position. I love how they protected for whatever might come for Kamara. And I think they're going to have even without Kamara, between Jamal Williams and Kendre Miller, I think they're going to have a nice 1-2 punch.
For sure. Kyrie Robinson, by the way, of West Texas A&M University.
Yes, I knew it was one of the A&M. Yes, West Texas A&M. Yes.
Feels like one of those like West Texas Commerce Poli-Sci University of kind of situation.
I hate to say it, I knew it was a school that no one had seen any of their games. At least no one.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Very New Orleans Saints UDFA.
Yeah.
The thing that I love about the Jamal Williams edition for New Orleans, and we're gonna wrap up here with Allante Taylor because we were talking about big plays. He had a big play. But the thing that I love about the Jamal Williams edition is that it kind of reminds me of 2017, 2018, the off-field brand that Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara began to build together. It's where they were in all the interviews together. They were, best friends. They had all this stuff. Jamal Williams reminds me of a guy that might be able to bring that same type of energy to his connection with Alvin Kamara. So I agree with you completely about not only what he can do on the field, but how he contributes off the field as well. Just to wrap us up, jumping over to the defensive side, because like I mentioned, we talked about the big plays. I'd be remiss if we didn't discuss Alante Taylor, who I think is firmly entrenched in that competition with Paulson Adebo to start opposite Marshawn Lattimore. He makes a big play today with an interception to close out the team drills on Jay Kaner. Can you take us through a little bit of what you've seen from Allante Taylor, of course, with that interception that I've seen people call a pick six as well? Would you agree with that?
No, it was a pick six. He actually purposely stopped and rolled. I was actually in that end zone where he was running right at me. He had no offensive player was chasing him within at least 20 or 30 yards. No, it was absolutely, without question, a pick six. And look, he's working a lot in the slot. I think they're trying to come up with a way to get their best guys on the field. I think Marshawn Lattimore has worked exceptionally good so far. He looks like Lattimore, super quick. Yesterday, he dove at a ball to bat it away. I love what Lattimore's done. You want to get your next best two on the field, and assuming that's Adebo and Allante Taylor, I wouldn't be surprised to see Allante Taylor in the slot. And what's best about it is, and I don't have a good number on exactly how many drops he had or interceptions called back.
Yeah.
Now, Allante Taylor got so unlucky with interceptions last year, and there is a component of luck, and it's nice to see that maybe the luck's going to turn around because he's a guy who could absolutely intercept 4 or 5 or 6 passes on the season, and I think he has got. Look, he was one of those guys. When I talk about just watch it and see what happens at rookie minicamp last year, I did a story saying, "Oh my God, Allante Taylor looks like a legitimate guy." Then he got hurt. We didn't see him for weeks. And then he came back at the end of the year, and he looked like that guy. Allante Taylor's the guy I've been high on since literally the first rookie minicamp last year, and I haven't seen anything to change my mind about that. Look, I do these things on the touch screen. I did a whole touch screen about Jeff Ireland, about why the Saints shouldn't trade away their second, third, or fourth round picks. And Allante Taylor is like one of the huge reasons because the Saints have in those first 4 rounds, Jeff Ireland has been unbelievably successful when drafting for the Saints. And Allante Taylor is a perfect example. A guy that was really not on the Saints' radar. We weren't even necessarily thinking cornerback. They waited for their own pick. They didn't trade up to get him. And then they took this guy who I think looks like he could be a star at cornerback for a long time. I love the pick. I liked everything about him last year. And yeah, today, every time you see him, he sort of confirms it one more time. And yeah, look, I mean, and I love him in the number 1. I mean, let me say this too.
Oh yeah, for sure.
If you want to be a cornerback and wear number 1, that takes an ego. And you don't mind that in a cornerback. A cornerback wearing number 1. So now anybody who beats you could say, I beat number 1. But he's not afraid to wear number 1. And he has looked the part of a starting NFL cornerback, I think, since the day he walked in that building. And I've seen nothing to defer me from that.
Allante Taylor wearing number 1 and also a tattoo behind his ear that simply says 2 words, "I'm him." Big time ego, a lot of attitude and confidence in the best way possible. In the best way possible.
We believe it by the fact that he asked for number 1. Right.
That's it.
He asked for number 1 unless they believe I'm him. Right.
All right, y'all, that does it for another episode of Locked On Saints. Appreciate all the everydayers out there for making us your first listen of the day every day. Big shout out, of course, to Doug Mouton. You can find him over at Channel 4 every single day, as well as on Twitter at DMouton, MOUTON, WWL on Twitter. Coming up tomorrow, we're recapping the entirety of minicamp. We're going to be joined by John Hendricks from over at Sports News Network, my colleague over there with the Sports Illustrated site covering the New Orleans Saints. We're going to take a big look back at everything with minicamps and then get you some bonus episodes over the course of the weekend. Since I wasn't able to do any live shows this week, still going to make sure you get a little bit of that lanyap all throughout the week. Appreciate you as always, y'all, for making Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, say hi. And if you want to keep that conversation going, head over to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSaints today. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.